Hello there, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics of the European Union, the EU. The European Commission has decided to classify Cameroon as a non-cooperating country in the fight against illegal, unreported, and unregulated so-called IUU fishing. The so-called red card means that no fishery products from Cameroon can be imported into the EU countries, even if they are provided with catch certificates from the Cameroonian authorities. Commissioner for Fisheries Virgio Sinquevičius said, "Sustainable fisheries and better maritime governance go hand in hand, and the Commission is strongly committed to both. We have a zero-tolerance policy towards IUU fishing, which is why the Commission acted decisively this week and issued Cameroon a red card. We remain ready to continue the dialogue with Cameroon to address the threat that IUU fishing poses to the sustainability of fish stocks, coastal communities, food security, and the livelihoods of those fishermen who adhere to the regulations or comply with regulations." This week's decision builds on the EU's IUU regulation, which aims to tackle illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing and ensure that only legally caught fishery products can enter the EU market. The inclusion of Cameroon in the list of non-cooperating countries is based on the persistence of serious deficiencies outlined in a communication adopted in February 2021, which already warned of the possibility of Cameroon being classified as a non-cooperating country. In particular, the Cameroonian authorities have failed to ensure adequate control of the national fishing fleet and take the necessary remedial action to halt and prevent IUU fishing. The Commission will continue its dialogue with the Cameroonian authorities to assist the country in addressing the identified shortcomings. The Commission will now propose to the Council to add this country to the list of non-cooperating countries. IUU fishing is one of the greatest threats to the sustainable use of living marine resources. It threatens the basis of the European Union's Common Fisheries Policy, or CFP, and the EU's efforts to promote better maritime governance at international level. IUU fishing also poses a major threat to the marine environment and marine biodiversity. To achieve the European Green Deal and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal on the conservation and sustainable use of the oceans, seas, and marine resources, the Commission opposes zero-tolerance approach. It has a zero-tolerance approach to IUU fishing. The total value of IUU fishing is estimated at 10 to 20 billion per year. Between 11 and 26 million tons of fish are caught illegally every year, and this corresponds to at least 15% of global catches. This week's Commission decision was taken on the basis of the EU's IUU regulation, which came into force in 2020. One of its pillars is the catch certification scheme, which aims to ensure that only fishery products caught legally are allowed to enter the EU market. The regulation also provides special mechanisms for dialogue with countries that do not comply with their obligations under international law as flag, coastal, port, and market states. While a lack of cooperation in the dialogue can result in the country being classified as a non-cooperating third country, the so-called red card, and subsequent listing, the IUU dialogues are generally based on the principles of cooperation and support between countries and are an important step in the fight against IUU fishing. And that is something that happened to Cameroon this week. And since November 2012, the Commission has opened a formal dialogue with 26 third countries, which it has officially warned about the need for effective action to combat IUU fishing. In most cases, significant progress has been made, allowing the Commission to satisfactorily complete the formal dialogue phase and annul the decisions taken. Few countries have not shown the necessary commitment and taken no action to address the shortcomings identified. Sweden has had a new government since October, and now the Scandinavians also hold the EU Council presidency. That's not an easy task in view of the Ukraine war. Sweden took over the EU Council presidency from the Czech Republic at the turn of the year. The Scandinavian country will therefore play an important role as a leader and mediator in Brussels over the next 6 months. The Scandinavians do not have an easy job, especially because of the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, as I said, and the persistently high energy prices, but also because of the fight against the climate crisis with the completion of the EU package Fit for 55 and the permanent bone of contention, migration. Sweden is taking over the Council presidency at a time when the Union is facing historic challenges, emphasized Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson in mid-December. Sweden's priorities should focus on a greener, safer and freer Europe. The focus here is on security, prosperity, democratic values and the rule of law. Kristersson and his cabinet are still relatively unknown faces on the EU stage. The Conservative government has only been in office for around 2.5 months and has replaced the cabinet of Social Democrat Magdalena Andersson. As the first Swedish head of government ever, Kristersson is working closely with the right-wing populist Sweden Democrats, who have always been left out on issues such as security and immigration. The right-wing populists are not in the government, but as the second strongest parliamentary force and with more mandates than Kristersson's party, the moderates, they still have a lot of power there in Stockholm. Despite the EU skepticism of his supporter party, EU Minister Jessica Roswall said in her government that her government will give EU work high priority. It is in Sweden's interest to keep the EU together and tackle issues that need common solutions. The 27 EU member states take turns presiding over the EU Council every 6 months. The presidency chaired numerous meetings in Brussels, Luxembourg and its own country and sets its own priorities and tries to mediate its controversies. The Czech Republic came before Sweden and France before that. Germany, where I'm sitting, last held the presidency in the second half of 2020. Sweden and neighboring Finland are the two northernmost countries in the EU. As a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the two countries decided in May to also apply for NATO membership. 28 of the 30 NATO members have already ratified the proposals. Only Turkey, which has been blocking so far, and the EU country Hungary have not done that yet. On the occasion of the Swedish Council presidency, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and other Commission representatives will travel to Kiruna in the far north of Sweden in mid-January. That is almost 1,000 kilometers north of Stockholm, but only about 400 kilometers from the EU's external border with Russia. The night is to be spent in an ice hotel. With a bit of luck, the guests from Brussels will also see the Northern Lights. The European Commission has proposed giving medical devices more time to certify, thus reducing the risk of bottlenecks. The proposal provides longer transition periods for the transition to the new rules of the medical devices regulation. For higher risk devices such as pacemakers and hip implants by the end of 2020, and for medium and lower risk devices such as syringes or reusable surgical instruments by the end of 2028, Council and Parliament still have to agree though. The new transition periods are based on the risk class of the medical devices and will ensure that patients have uninterrupted access to medical devices. It will also allow medical devices that have been placed on the market under the current regulatory framework and are still available now to remain on the market. That means the sell-off period is removed. For medical devices for which a certificate or a declaration of conformity was issued before May 26, 2021, the transition period to the new regulations will be from May 26, 2024 to December 31, 2027 for higher risk devices and for intermediate risk devices and lower risk until December 31, 2028. The extension will be subject to certain conditions, so only devices that are safe and for which manufacturers have already taken steps to transition to the rules of the medical devices regulation, or always those names, will be granted more time. The proposal also introduces a transition period until May 26 in 2026 for Class 3 custom-made implantable devices, giving manufacturers more time to obtain notified body certification. In this case too, the transition period depends on the manufacturer applying for conformity assessment for medical devices of this type before May 26 in 2024. To accommodate the transition periods proposed with these changes, the proposal extends the validity of certificates issued up to May 26, 2021, when the medical devices regulation was coming into force. The Commission is also proposing to remove the sale period currently set out in the medical devices regulation and the in vitro diagnostics regulation. The sell-off period corresponds to the end date after which products that have already been placed on the market and are still commercially available and when they should be withdrawn from the market. The elimination of this sell-off period ensures that safe and important medical devices that have already been placed on the market continue to be available to healthcare systems and the patients who depend on them. The proposal does not change the current safety and performance requirements set out in the medical devices regulation. It only changes the transitional provisions to give manufacturers more time to transition from the previously applicable rules to the new requirements of the new regulation. The proposal now has to be adopted by the European Parliament and the Council through an accelerated co-decision procedure. Medical devices play a crucial role in saving lives by providing innovative medical solutions to diagnose, prevent, monitor, treat, or alleviate disease. In April 2017, the European Parliament and Council adopted a regulation or two regulations to strengthen the legal framework for medical devices and in vitro diagnostic medical devices. They are intended to ensure a high level of health protection for patients and users, as well as the smooth functioning of the internal market for these products. In order to achieve these goals, and given the problems identified with the previous legal framework, the two regulations established a more robust system of conformity assessment to ensure the quality, safety, and performance of medical devices placed on the EU market. The regulation on medical devices has been applicable since May 26, 2021, as I said, and it contains a transition period until May 26, 2024. At the Council, with the Employment, Social Policy, Health and Consumer Protection of December 9th in 2022, EU health ministers called on the Commission to swiftly come up with a proposal to extend the transition period in the medical devices regulation. The European Parliament and the Council will now negotiate this proposal. EU Health Commissioner Stella Kyriakides has welcomed the agreement of the 27 EU countries on a coordinated approach to travelers from China. At a crisis response meeting convened by the Swedish Council Presidency on Friday, EU countries strongly recommended requiring all passengers entering the EU from China to have a current negative COVID-19 test. They also recommend wearing a medical or FFP2 mask on flights to and from China. In view of the COVID-19 developments in China, the need for reliable data, and the relaxation of China's travel restrictions from January 8, 2023, the EU countries agreed on the following guidelines. The associated countries of the Schengen area also took part in the meeting within the framework of the Integrated Political Crisis Response Regime, or IPCR. Member states agreed to recommend FFP2, N95 or KN95 medical masks or respirators for all passengers on flights to and from China. Member states agreed to advise people traveling to and from China, as well as aircraft and airport staff, on personal hygiene and other health protection measures. Member states are urged to introduce the requirement of a negative COVID-19 test taken no more than 48 hours prior to departure from China for all passengers departing from China to EU member states. Member states are invited to complement these measures with some additional measures I'm talking about now. Random testing of passengers from China and sequencing of all positive results in order to better monitor the epidemiological situation. The testing and sequencing of wastewater from airports with international flights and planes arriving from China. And further efforts to share vaccine doses and increase vaccination coverage, including booster doses, particularly among vulnerable groups. The member states will continue to assess the situation and review the measures put in place by mid-month. This year, the EU celebrates the 30th anniversary of its single market. It was created on January 1st, 1993 and enables the free movement of goods, services, people and capital within the EU. In 30 years, the single market has led to unprecedented market integration between member states' economies, serving as an engine for growth and competitiveness and supporting Europe's economic and political power on a global scale. It also played a key role in accelerating the economic development of the new member states joining the EU, removing barriers to market entry and boosting growth. More recently, the single market has been instrumental in helping Europe deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and the energy crisis resulting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Maintaining and strengthening the integrity of the internal market will continue to be of crucial importance in the future so that Europe can react to new challenges in a coordinated manner and further promote the competitiveness of the European economies. Thanks to the single market, the EU has managed to improve the lives of all Europeans, including through accelerating the transition to a greener and more digital economy. And that means the European Green Deal is the EU's growth strategy. Based on the EU proposals Fit for 55 and Digital Decade, the EU is creating a legal framework that supports the green and digital transition in Europe. The industrial strategy accompanies EU industry in these transitions. The single market also helps ensure the continued availability of essential inputs for our businesses, including essential raw materials and advanced technologies, such as semiconductors. It's ensuring a high level of security and world-leading technological standards. Thanks to EU legislation, consumers can be confident that all products on the internal market are safe and meet high standards of environmental, labor, personal data, and human rights protection. Not in all cases, but they're still working on it. These regulations and standards are often adopted worldwide, giving European companies a competitive edge and enhancing Europe's standing in the world, while encouraging a race to the best standards. Today, the EU is a global standard setter. It has responded to the recent crises with unprecedented speed and determination. Tackling recent crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic and the current energy crisis requires a common and coordinated European approach. During the COVID-19 pandemic, it was possible to keep internal borders open most of the times and ensure the smooth functioning of the internal market so that vaccines, medical equipment, and other essential materials could reach those in need. Today, Europe's response to the energy crisis is based on the Repower EU plan, which builds on the power of the internal market to enable the EU to collectively procure more diversified energy sources and significantly accelerate the development and deployment of clean and renewable energies. This has already reduced the EU's dependence on Russian fossil fuels on a big scale. To ensure that the single market remains a common good that benefits everyone in the EU, the Commission is constantly developing it in new areas and making sure that the rules already in place work in practice. To this end, the Commission works closely with member state authorities who share responsibility for the effective enforcement of single market rules. In December 2022, to kick off the series of events marking the 30th anniversary of the single market, the Commission presented an analytical paper on the state of the single market 30 years after its creation and its role in driving EU resilience. Throughout 2023, there will be numerous debates, exhibitions, and campaigns organized together with stakeholders across the EU to promote the achievements of the single market and engage citizens in the debate on its future. In this context, the Commission will issue a communication identifying the important achievements and benefits of the single market, but also identifying implementation gaps and future priorities so that the single market can continue to play a key role. The single market was created on January 1st in 1993. It followed the signing of the Maastricht Treaty on February 7, 1992. Originally, 12 EU countries made up the single market. That was Belgium, Denmark, Germany, Ireland, Greece, Spain, France, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Portugal, and the United Kingdom. Today, the single market includes 27 member states plus Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Norway, with Switzerland having partial access. And the UK is not a part of it anymore. The European Commission has cleared France's plan to first grant restructuring aid of 120 million to restore Austral's viability and 17 million in aid to compensate for the grant losses incurred by the company between March and June 2020 as a result of the coronavirus outbreak, and it's approved under EU state aid rules. The French airline Air Austral, based on Reunion Island, was founded in October 1990 and ensures territorial continuity between Reunion Island and the neighboring Indian Ocean islands, or mostly it's Mayotte, and the metropolitan France. The company, equipped with 8 aircraft, also serves air connections with countries in the southwest of the Indian Ocean and countries in Asia. On January 18th in 2022, following the Commission's approval of rescue aid in the form of a 20 million loan from the French state to Air Austral, France notified the Commission of 120 million in restructuring aid to finance the airline restructuring plan for approval. And last week, on the basis of Article 107 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union, the TFEU, and the guidelines on state aid for rescuing and restructuring firms in difficulty, the Commission approved Air Austral's restructuring aid and also the restructuring plan. In the Commission's view, the plan will ensure the long-term viability of the company, thus preventing its liquidation, which would be particularly damaging to Reunion Island and assisted outermost region. In addition, the public financing of the restructuring plan complies with the principle of proportionality, since the beneficiary contributes to the financing of the plan from its own or private resources. Furthermore, the public funding allows the airline to restore its long-term viability and has little impact on trade between member states. In particular, the Commission has considered measures to limit distortions of competition. That means limiting the number of seats offered by Air Austral, limiting the number of routes served by the company, prohibiting the acquisition of shares in other companies, and opening commercial arrangements to interested airlines. These measures will be implemented throughout the life of the restructuring plans, that means from January 2022 to March 2025. France notified to the Commission also the aid worth 17 million to compensate Air Austral for losses suffered between March 17th and June 30th in 2020, which are directly related to the measures taken to contain the travel restrictions imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to these limitations, the company experienced significant operating losses and a sharp drop in traffic and, of course, profitability during this period. The Commission assessed the measure also on the basis of Article 107 of the TFEU. The Commission can then approve aid intended to compensate certain companies or sector of the economy for damage caused by extraordinary events such as the COVID-19 pandemic. In particular, the Commission found that the French aid measures compensate for losses directly attributable to the COVID-19 pandemic. They consider the measure appropriate as the compensation does not go beyond what is necessary to cover the damage. Therefore, the Commission has concluded that the French measure is compatible with EU state aid rules. As you usually know, I don't all the time bring you these state aid rules decisions of the Commission. There are tons of it, usually every week. But in this case, I brought one in again just to show one thing a lot of people forget most of the time. The EU is not only on continental Europe. There are a lot of places in the rest of the world, and I talked about this after Brexit in the case of Britain as well, where the problems came. There are a lot of other places in the world where it's still the EU, like Réunion. And as I said, in the British case after Brexit, I talked about a lot of places in the world that got in trouble because they couldn't trade anymore with their direct neighbors they depend on because there suddenly was an EU border on a Caribbean island, for example. And so that's why I put in this this part with the French state aid, just to remind everyone a little bit more about the real extent of the EU. And this concludes today's report on the politics of the European Union. I'll be back in my video tomorrow, and so I hope I'll see you there. I'll be back.